how to rename yourself. And sorry again for this issue. So now we have all our speakers online. We've got almost 30 participants. So we'll make a start. So bonjour and good morning again. Welcome to this webinar on coastal ecosystem restoration for climate adaptation in the Pacific. So my name is Nicolas Roch, the true one. I'm a coastal and marine management specialist at SPREP, based in Apia, Samoa. And together with Mathilde, our Kiwa project coordinator, we are delighted to have you joining and attending this webinar today. This webinar is organized as part of the Technical Assistance Program that SPREP, SPC, and IUCN are providing to the Kiwa Initiative. It is the first of a series of learning events that we discuss with the Kiwa Secretariat to provide a space where Kiwa projects and partners can share their experience, challenges, expectations, and further strengthens their capacities on specific topics, including this one on coastal restoration for climate resilience in the Pacific. So from now on, by June 2025, our objective is to organize other events to discuss in more details this key topic for climate adaptation and resilience in the Pacific, including a technical workshop, which we will be organizing with Conservation International at the end of this month in Fiji, just after the Kiwa Steering Committee meeting, to dive deeper into the mangrove restoration topic. As for today, we wanted to open this series of events by touching on different aspects and issues that arise when planning, designing, or implementing a coastal restoration project or activity, with the objective of hearing from you, your challenges, your expectations, and suggestions for future events and support. So to do so, we have the following agenda today. So I would like to first thank our speakers, Richard Griffiths from Island Conservation, Bridget Kennedy from Conservation International, and François Tron from Abondance, contracted by SPREP. And I will introduce them later before their respective presentations. So I would like to thank you all for your time and for sharing your knowledge and experience that will provide a great opportunity for us to discuss where we are at in terms of coastal restoration within the Kiwa community and what progress can be made over the next 6 to 8 months through the technical assistance that we provide under the Kiwa Initiative, through our networks, projects, networks of experts and practitioners, and also the resources and platforms that we can further share and which we are involved in and which we can build upon to assist in any way we can to foster coastal restoration projects that are impactful and sustainable for Pacific countries and communities. So with that, a little bit of housekeeping. So you can, as you all see, step in the chat box, ask questions in the chat during presentations. After each presentation, we'll have, let's say, 5 minutes for questions, clarification questions. And near the end of our webinar, we'll have a Q&A and a discussion, open discussion, before we wrap up the webinar. So I just wanted to provide a quick overview of what we are talking about in terms of coastal ecosystem restoration in the context of climate adaptation in the Pacific, just to set the scene of the main issues and challenges, also reflecting on what resources exist already, so that our speakers can provide more examples and insights based on their experience and share some lessons learned that we can further discuss together. So as this is a webinar as part of our Kiwa Technical Assistance Program and Capacity Building Program, of course, you all know that restoration can be part of the broad range of nature-based solutions as with the definition given by IUCN, restoring natural or modified ecosystems are part of the wide range of nature-based solutions for climate change adaptation, providing that they both address ecological and societal challenges, like climate change adaptation, for example, for communities, countries. So when we speak about restoration, it is not just about planting trees or planting corals. It's about restoring ecological processes, functions, and ecosystem services in our context that support Pacific livelihoods, economies, well-being, and climate resilience. Of course, there are a number of ecosystem services that each project seeks to address when designing and implementing a restoration project. And we'll see what it entails in terms of coastal ecosystem restoration. Again, I don't want to go really deep into terminology and concepts, but based on one of the latest resources that has been shared during the last CBD COP in Cali, Colombia, we can at least keep in mind that when we speak about restoration, there is a broad continuum. So this one is given by FAO, the Secretariat of the Convention on the Biological Diversity, and the Society for Ecological Restoration, and allowing us to share a broad understanding. Of course, there are debates and so on, scientific and political debates around that. But ecosystem restoration can entail this whole continuum from reducing impacts on ecosystems through to fully recovering native ecosystems. So with that, that's why we sometimes speak about environmental remediation when ecosystems are really affected or modified or transformed. Same for ecosystem or ecological rehabilitation and ecological restoration are all part of this restorative continuum. So the goal is just to set the scene of what is the range, what is the continuum of activities and projects that we can also think about when we talk about ecosystem and coastal ecosystem restoration. Of course, we know that given connectivity between ecosystems, and especially at the interface of land and sea, there is a number of interlinkages and interdependencies to take into account. So this also gives or allow us to think about holistic approach because again, ecological restoration is not just about planting mangroves at a specific site, but understanding the whole context in which ecosystems and the ecological restoration projects are taking place. So this connectivity can, for example, also in the context of atoll nations, atoll islands, there is this one of the recent articles that provide a really good understanding of this connectivity between species and ecosystems in the case of atoll nations, and especially the whole dynamic of island accretion, erosion, etc., showing the broad cycle, I would say, from producing reef sediments, transferring sediments, and depositing sediments on islands. That these articles provide a really good understanding of how we can design and foster local restoration efforts to respond to a global challenge like sea level rise, and especially for atom nations. So restoring those sediment processes is really a key factor when, for example, designing and implementing coastal ecosystem restoration projects in an atoll context. So I know you are well aware of the challenges and barriers that you also as practitioners encounter when designing and implementing coastal restoration in the Pacific region. So this list is not exhaustive, definitely, but I would like to emphasize a few of them, starting with environmental challenges, of course. So human pressures are key drivers in terms of modifying or transforming ecosystems or altering their resilience or adaptive capacities to cope with climate change, for example. And climate change, on top of that, further stress ecosystems and their adaptive capacities, for example, with warming waters or sea level rise that can, of course, disrupt a coral or mangrove restoration projects, highlighting the need for resilient species in specific contexts. There are other pressures and impacts, of course. Waste and pollution are often undermined when speaking about coastal ecological restoration. Like invasive species have a huge impact as well, and Richard Griffiths will tell us more about that. As you know, invasive species is a huge challenge already happening across the Pacific Island region, and that can preempt or damage coral reefs restoration efforts or make them much harder, I would say. There are, of course, technical and resource constraints. So we often lack data, baseline data, especially, or data about the pressures and drivers that drive ecosystem modification or transformations, but also a lack of monitoring. Long-term evaluation and monitoring is the key aspect in our region to track, to be able to track restoration successes, but also failures, and also to do better from one time to another. Funding and resources is, of course, a huge challenge in the region. So be it funding gaps, but also the funding dependent on the project cycles and call for projects, and calling for also community-led solutions or also innovative and more sustainable financing mechanism. And of course, there are a broad range of social and institutional challenges, as you all know. So engagement and buy-in with local communities and how we can combine their traditional knowledge and practices with other restoration practices and techniques. Also, restoration projects can seek long-term goals, but what about more immediate community needs? So it's a matter of consulting in a participatory process with communities and balance those short-term versus long-term needs and goals. I'm sure we'll hear about that later during the webinar. Land tenure systems are a key factor in the region in terms of conservation and restoration projects, of course, and also restoration is quite often less considered compared to conservation I mean, in terms of policy frameworks and also coordination and cross-sectoral cooperation between government levels or different policy sectors. I will touch on that later at the end of my presentation. So to overcome some of these challenges, of course, we don't start from scratch speaking about ecological restoration or coastal restoration in the region. So just a few examples or reminders about recent workshops that touch on this topic in the past few years. So a regional workshop dedicated on mangrove conservation, management, and restoration that was organized in 2021 by Conservation International, IUCN, and SPREP. It was a hybrid from New Caledonia and online. Last year, the Coastal NBS Finance and Policy Workshop organized by CI, IUCN, and OPOC. And in July, the Pacific Cities Regional Workshop that we organized with the Ocean and Climate Platform, also highlighting some of the challenges and leading practices to cope with sea level rise and associated impacts. So those are providing already some resources, some background, and of course there are other mechanisms and platforms dedicated to ecosystem restoration as a whole. So as you all know, we are in the midst of the UN Decade on ecosystem restoration. And at the more regional level, the NBS Working Group under the Pacific Island Roundtable and the sub-working group on ecological restoration will be able also to foster some of our collective efforts toward best practices for ecological restoration as a whole, but also coastal ecosystem restoration. And of course, there are a number of resources. It's far from exhaustive, but when we think about that more than 90% of Pacific Islanders live within 5 kilometers from the coast, that most of the cities and infrastructures are located along the coastline. Of course, that also reminds us that what we call green-gray infrastructures or hybrid infrastructures can also be a way to engage in coastal ecosystem restoration projects based on resources and learning and lessons learned, like for example the green-gray community of practice that CI is leading at the global level. I just wanted to provide just a snapshot of existing resources that we can build upon. So for some of the key coastal ecosystems that we are talking about today. So for coral reef restoration, there have been a number of resources. So at the global level, mostly developed either under ICRI, UNEP, and my point here is not to be exhaustive, but just to showcase a few resources that we have compiled as part of the learning events on coastal ecosystem restoration, and that we would like to discuss with you how best to share those resources, what is missing, and what would be a good way for all of us to be up to date and keep track of these resources as long as they are released and available. So I guess mangroves have been one of the key ecosystems where a great number of resources have been developed in the past 10 years, I would say. So I just provide here a few examples, especially one of the latest ones in French by FEFEM on mangrove restoration, and at the global level, the Global Mangrove Alliance their best practice guidelines for mangrove restoration are some of the key and recent one. But in the region, we've got also other resources like the community-based mangrove planting handbook for Papua New Guinea, and some training manual for communities and field workers on how to build a nursery. So again, this is not exhaustive, and I just would like to give a snapshot and discuss with you all what to do about this from these resources. How useful are they? To what extent we can use it in the specific context, in your specific context, and what couldn't be provided as part of the Kiwa Technical Assistance Program or beyond, to make the most of these resources and to develop other resources and guidelines and support for our region. Seagrass. So we are starting to see more and more resources on seagrass restoration. Fortunately, they have been quite undermined so far, but like the 10 golden rules that have been developed for coral reefs and previously for reforestation. So we've got this article providing golden rules for seagrass restoration, for example. So in this recent article, but again, in the region, there are a few resources that can be also compiled and accessible through a repository, like this seagrass restoration guidelines for Kiribati, which was developed in 2020. And then finally, when we talk about coastal ecosystem restoration, not to forget the whole range of coastal vegetation happening in between mangroves, seagrass, etc. Especially all the beaches in the Pacific Island region. So, like for example, this guide which was developed a few years ago on the coastal ecosystem-based rehabilitation guide that attracted a lot of interest, and we would love to hear if you know it, if you use it, and how we can further develop some of these resources. And again, we know that each context has its own ecological, societal challenge specificities, and I just provided here an example from French Polynesia, where they developed guidelines to identify plants, vegetation for coastal restoration in the French Polynesian context, and specifically in some parts of French Polynesia. So because we know that sometimes practitioners struggles to identify species or the right species depending on the context, on the physical ecological dynamics. So basically, what I wanted to highlight here is just to hear from you later during the webinar about the resources that you know, the resources that you would need, and how we can assist in that effort at the regional levels. So basically, speaking about coastal ecosystem restoration, so we know that due to the connectivity and socio-ecological interdependencies, this has to be done in an holistic approach, but at the same time, it's highly context specific and not one size fits all. So it requires to assess options and create enabling conditions for impactful and sustainable projects in terms of coastal ecosystem restoration. And of course, restoration can be part or combined with other kind of nature-based solutions and adaptation options within space and time, and also to take that into a broader perspective, like, for example, adaptive pathways where restoration can come and open up other options after a decade or after many years of restoration if the outcomes are positive and sustainable. And of course, sustainable financing is a key question now. So some of you are just back from the CBD COP16, where these guidelines have been just released and discussed during the COP. It's a great resources available online to guide how to monitor and deliver restoration outcomes under the target 2 of the Kunming Memorial Global Biodiversity Framework, because of course what we are speaking about today has also implications with our countries and governments in terms of this target 2 of the Global Biodiversity Framework in terms of ecosystem restoration. So there is a critical need also, we know, to upscale ecosystem restoration and coastal ecosystem restoration in the Pacific region at landscape restoration and whole of island as well. And we'll hear from that in a minute. So, and just to wrap up this presentation, what we aim to achieve through this series of learning events is that we believe that the Kiwa projects that are implementing restoration activities provide really a unique opportunity to learn from each other and also to further strengthen our collective efforts toward coastal restoration for climate adaptation. And where we can learn from each other and where we can support anywhere we can, we have listed here a few potential areas, but we will come back to that during the discussion session, and this can be provided through a variety of formats, either workshops, policy briefs, case studies, etc. With the overarching goal maybe to also increase our capacities to monitor, evaluate, and learn from Kiwa projects and beyond at the regional level. So thank you for that. I would probably invite you to keep questions in the chat box for now, because I've been a bit too long. I'm sorry for that. And I would now like to invite Richard Griffiths. So Richard is the head of operations for the Pacific region for Island Conservation, a small but global NGO working a lot in the Pacific region in terms of island restoration projects and activities. Yes, Richard, the floor is yours, and I will, as agreed, run your slide, and you will just tell me when moving from one slide to another, if that's okay.
Thank you, Nicholas. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Nice to see you all. And thank you, Nicholas, for the introduction. I don't know if you can run some of the videos that are embedded, Nicholas, by clicking somewhere. Thank you. In my presentation today, I may shock you a little, but I hope to leave you with a sense of hope that there are some tangible things we can do to improve our chances of adapting to climate change. And as Nicholas mentioned, my theme today is invasive species and why actions to address this threat should be included in every country's adaptation plan. Next slide, please, Nicholas. There's no need for me to tell you that our climate is changing. You will all have seen evidence of this for yourselves. We all know that sea levels are rising. Our freshwater aquifers are being contaminated by salt water. Our ocean is becoming more acid. And next slide. And the intensity of storms is only increasing. As communities, we are going to have to become more self-sufficient. There will be times, much like during the pandemic, when we are cut off from the outside world for periods of time. This means we have to grow our own food, we have to be able to catch our own fish, and have access to the natural resources around us. We need to be resilient. Next slide. Unfortunately, we also have to contend with other threats, and foremost amongst those is the issue of invasive species. Invasive species undermine our ability to be resilient, and they do that in multiple ways. Next slide. Most obviously, they affect how much food we can grow. They limit which crops we can sow, and they spoil the food we have harvested and stored. They impact our health. Next slide. Some carry diseases, others cause them, and they impact the quality of our water. Next slide. And this is another video, Nicholas. They also impact the availability of our natural resources. This video shows rats preying on a green turtle nest on the island of Tetiaroa in Polynesia. But pigs, mongoose, monitor lizards are also a major problem for turtle recruitment. Next slide, Nicholas. And another video. In this video, we see a rat killing and making off with a seabird chick on Henderson Island. And what you see in these two videos is happening every day and every night on islands across the Pacific. Ultimately, this means fewer resources available to us, but it also leads to broken ecosystems. Next slide. And what we see on islands where introduced mammals have been introduced is the loss of seabirds, a decline in our forests, and this has flow-on effects, or has had flow-on effects to our reefs. Seabirds, like turtles, are a connector species. They feed at sea, but breed on land. The nutrients that they bring with them nourish the soils on our islands, but at the same time, those nutrients also make their way back to the ocean, where we now know they are a crucial element affecting coral productivity and reef health. On islands with no rats and plenty of seabirds, corals can grow up to 4 times faster, and there can be nearly twice as many fish. Next slide. Those connections need to be considered when thinking about how best to protect our reefs, which are our last line of defense against storm surges and sea level rise. Next slide. Now, I promise to end on a positive note, so let's start looking at the bright side. And the good news is that there are solutions. One such solution, next slide, is that we can remove many invasive species from islands. Not all invasive species and not all islands, but there is much that can be done. And there are some solutions for species where eradication is not possible. Next slide. This is just one example of islands where rats have been successfully removed. More than 700 islands globally have had rats removed from them, with huge benefits to both nature and people. Next slide. We also know we can prevent new invasive species arriving on our islands, and we can stop those species that have been removed from returning. However, the capacity we have available for this right now in the Pacific is insufficient, and we know we need to do more on this front to protect the islands at the level that is needed. Next slide. And while we're on the subject of solutions, I just want to give a shout out to PRISMS, which is the Pacific Regional Invasive Species Management Service that is hosted by SPREP. And this group of this coalition is there to provide Pacific countries and territories with the technical support they need to tackle the threat of invasive species. And when we remove invasive species from islands, next slide, wonderful things happen. We can grow more food. Our forests recover. This sequence of images in this slide shows how the native Pisonia forest recovered on Palmyra Atoll shortly after rats were removed. Next slide. We can re-establish those ecosystem processes that are so crucial to our reefs. And as our last line of defense against climate change, we want our reefs to be in the best possible health going into the future. One way we can do that is to remove the invasive species that are affecting those ecosystem connections and processes. We can bring back the seabirds. Next slide. So my pitch to you all is that the threat, that invasive species as a threat, needs to be stamped over every climate adaptation plan prepared in the Pacific. These plans should articulate how the question of invasive species will be addressed, because it's a really key piece of improving our resilience to climate change. Next slide. And I will stop there and hand back to Nicholas, and happy to answer questions now or at the end of the webinar.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you very much for the clear and comprehensive presentation of the links between invasive species and restoration efforts in the Pacific Island context. Yes, please, I would like to invite our participants to, if they have any questions for Richard. We can take 5 minutes now before moving on to the next presentation, but please raise your hand or just open up your mic. Yeah, please, Fia.
Yes, awesome. Whakalapalaya to everybody. I found this presentation awesome. I just put it in the chat as well. Our minister announced the removal of 4 key invasives by 2030 for Niue, and we at the community would like to know how this will be implemented if it's endorsed by SPREP as well. Thank you.
That's a great question, Fia. Niue is a real champion in the Pacific for addressing the threat of invasives, and it's wonderful to hear your minister taking such initiative. How it might be affected, I think, there's some ideas around it which have been discussed with different stakeholders in Niue, but it's still very much something that needs to be worked out over time. There has been a feasibility assessment that has looked at that, the question of how invasive species like feral pigs, rats and other feral animals could be removed from UA. So I could certainly share that with you if you're interested.
Yes, to the sharing thing.
Great.
So, Richard, we've got a question in the chat from François. How much would it cost and how long would it take to eradicate key invasive species on the top priority Pacific Islands? Would you have a map of where these top priority islands are or could be?
It's a very difficult question to answer, Francois. Merci pour ça. Yes, the figure that I've always touted that would really help us address the loss of biodiversity in the Pacific and make a massive difference to livelihoods is $1 billion. I've mentioned that figure before. There is some analysis that's been done to substantiate that figure. If we really want to make a difference, turn the tide on extinctions and improve livelihoods across the Pacific by addressing invasive species, that's the sort of figure we're talking about. We have done some work to prioritize islands within some specific geographies within the Pacific, but certainly not across the region. Not from a, we've done it from a biodiversity standpoint, but not from a, you know, a climate standpoint or a community standpoint. And just to that answer your last question, I don't quite know how many islands, but there are 25,000 of them in the Pacific, and that would allow us to do a lot of them.
There is one question about guides or guidelines on how to eradicate or minimize invasives, or even guides about common invasives found in the Pacific region. So can you just tell us a bit about the kind of resources that have been developed in the recent years?
Yes, so SPREP is a great source of this material. You can reach out to their, what they call their Battler series. There are resources that talk about biosecurity and what's required to comprehensively protect our islands from new invasions. There's also resources that explain how to remove rats from small islands if you're doing it yourself. There are other resources about some of the other invasive species that we need to address in the Pacific. So that's a great starting point. And then of course reach out to your networks because there are other resources to be found. And I see a question from Moy, but I don't want to dominate the webinar, Nicholas, so just tell me to shut up. We have a lot of information on the impact of rats on our ecosystems. It's not right across the Pacific, but there's some great studies that have been done. And rats are an interesting one because their impacts on forest ecosystems are not obvious, not over short time spans. But because they're eating the seed and the seedlings of forest trees, it can take decades or hundreds of years to grow. They change the composition of our forests, and they compete for food with the birds. They prey on the birds in the forests. They prey on some of the other species that are really important for pollination and fertilization of the forest. So they have an insidious impact in many ways.
Thank you so much, Richard. And yeah, thank you very much. We were really glad to hear from you and because of the great job Island Conservation is doing in the region and the really close links. I mean, we can't really speak about coastal ecosystem restoration in the Pacific Island context without even thinking, not thinking about invasive species. Given the extent of damages and issues that are that invasive species pose on ecosystems in the Pacific Island context, and we can come back to that very specific topic later on during the webinar. I would like to invite now Bridget. So I will stop sharing my screen, and Bridget, tell me if you want to share yours. You
Thanks.
are able to do that now.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Yes, I will share my screen. Just one moment. And good morning, everyone. I will say I'm Bluvanaka from Fiji, where I am based. Make sure this. Is this working?
Yes, not in full screen yet, but
Make sure it's starting from the beginning.
perfect.
Wonderful. So, please.
Thank you, Bridget. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to connect with you all today. I think at the first start, I want to acknowledge I have a couple other colleagues in the room who I'm going to call upon to join me. Our lead for this program is currently on leave, so I'm stepping in and very honored to have the opportunity to talk to you all. But we are speaking about a program, and some of the really amazing folks that I get to work with every day are on the call, and I'll invite them to share some of their depth of knowledge and experience in the work that we've been doing at the community level in Rock Province in Fiji. We also have a colleague, Dr. Clint Cameron, I believe is still here, hopefully, and has been really instrumental in the technical support to this program and project. So first, that acknowledgement. I really appreciate the framing that you provided earlier, Nicholas. So I just want to start us out with a little bit of history. We've been working in Fiji since the early 2000s, and we really started our work on the ridgetops. We have, the benefit of working really closely with a number of communities in Rock Province. And for about a decade, we worked with them on terrestrial restoration and reforestation of a degraded area, which is a key biodiversity area, Mount Nakavandra, and restoring some of the biodiversity and corridor connectivity among Nakavandra and other key biodiversity areas in Fiji. We've got a map a bit later to show you more context of where in Fiji this is located if you're not familiar. So the important thing for us is that our community partnerships and our provincial level partnerships are longstanding, and they're grounded in trust and collaboration from the foundation of this program of work, which started in around 2009. So through that program, we worked really deeply with those communities to restore using native trees, native and endemic species, a little over 1,100 hectares of grasslands. We worked extensively to support our community partners to be able to germinate and grow seedlings themselves, and supported nursery development as a livelihood pathway, which I'll invite a colleague to talk about later to give you an update on a very exciting update that we're excited to share. we had, various survival rates on different sides of the mountain. So a lot of learning in terms of where species grow and how, communities can be really the drivers of restoration at scale across the Fiji Islands and across the Pacific. That was our goal, working specifically with our community partners to deliver this action, and also, contributing to biodiversity benefits and livelihood benefits. So we started on the ridge tops. And from that effort, we moved to the coastal area in 2021, a little earlier than 2021, but we received some broader funding support to really look at blue carbon funding opportunities and project development opportunities with our community partners and with the government of Fiji. There are a number of activities. We're not going to touch on all of them today, but just to give you an idea, it was designed as a comprehensive program that really does baseline science, looks at financing pathways for our community partners, has real tangible biodiversity and climate resilience strengthening benefits from our on-ground work with our community partners to restore degraded mangrove ecosystems, which we'll dive into a bit more. Policy considerations, and I think really critically, livelihood investments for our community partners, because this work isn't sustainable if they are not supportive and resilient and have different pathways to income. So I'll just stop here and I'll dive into some of these elements in the discussion. So I think before we can even talk about financing, before we can design any type of restoration intervention, baseline information is absolutely critical. Nicholas referenced there are a lot of mangrove restoration efforts and coastal restoration efforts around the region, around the world, that are unsuccessful, that have limited monitoring, that plant mangroves in places where they won't grow, and we know that. So what we started with was an understanding of, we wanted to understand the baseline and where our interventions and our limited resources, respectively, can be best utilized to strengthen and restore ecosystem services and climate services to our community partners. So we started initially with community level surveys, as well as some soil carbon surveys around the main island of Viti Levu. We decided to focus for this intervention on Viti Levu to really understand how the mangroves were functioning and where intervention would be most critical. To our excitement, I guess I would say, it was clear to us that mangroves in Ba, which is the sort of top left corner that you're looking at on the screen, they were devastated by Cyclone Winston and by previous cyclones, but from the geospatial assessment that we did, it was clear that they were regenerating. In Ra province, in Rewa and in Tai Levu, some of the work that we did, it was clear that there was no need for large-scale restoration. Sustainable management actions and livelihood investments were really clear, something that the government has been doing for a long time. And of course, I just want to acknowledge in the Ba Delta, WWF has been present there for quite a long time, and they're also providing support. So we zoned in on Ra, given some of the geospatial assessments that we did that showed that these mangroves were not regenerating naturally, and that additional intervention was needed to restore these areas and to restore the services that our community partners had lost after Tropical Cyclone Winston in 2016. Oh, hold on one second. There we go. So in addition to the geospatial assessments, a bit prior to this, actually, we also did soil carbon assessments to really understand what was there. We need to map our ecosystems, have a good database of science to inform different actions and priorities moving forward. We conducted this work with strong support from Dr. Clint Cameron, as well as analysis support from CSIRO in Australia, CSIRO. And now have a deeper understanding and an initial data set to contribute to Fiji's national inventory, looking at kind of wetland ecosystems across the country. This also helps us understand whether carbon trading, which is an interest to Fiji, not perhaps scalable broadly across the Pacific, but there are certain countries that are interested in this, and we follow government priorities. But looking at what the feasibility would be in these ecosystems, and this is the type of data that we would need. There's a full report with this information documented from 2020 that I'm very happy to share after the webinar. And all of this really helped us understand what are the drivers of deforestation and degradation in these areas. So I talked a bit about the spatial mapping. We also did a legal and a policy assessment to look at the drivers from that lens and understand if we work in these areas, are we actually going to unlock, longer term change? And what are the other recommendations at the national level to be able to support the strengthened management and restoration of coastal ecosystems and mangroves specifically for this assessment? We also did a very extensive community survey where we surveyed, I believe it was around 600 households in the 3 areas that I referenced, Bara and the Rewa Delta and Tel Aviv, to understand how people are using their mangroves. What are their perceptions? How are they important? Probably some of the most critical data that we can have, because they're the stewards of those ecosystems, and anything that we do needs to be widely informed and supported by them and supportive of them. So 3 assessments that we published, and we're very happy to share again the link. We have this broader technical report on the drivers of deforestation and degradation of mangrove loss in Fiji. We also worked with the Fiji government to develop a blue carbon trading pathways assessment. This has been a part of our support to Fiji under I forget the name of the steering committee group, a carbon technical steering committee, as they're looking at pathways for carbon trading. These are ever evolving conversations, and these documents were developed in the last 3 years, but really help to support, provide thoughts on, the best monetary pathway for Fiji to be able to finance all the actions that they want to do in the coastal zone realm. And the third is looking at if carbon trading does move forward, we need really strong benefit sharing mechanisms to ensure that funding generated or revenue is distributed equitably, and that there's a clear, government-driven process to anybody operating around carbon markets in Fiji that gives them guidance on how to design an equitable benefit sharing scheme. And this will bring me to the really exciting piece of this work, which is our site-based work around restoration. But truly, the baseline information is absolutely critical to have success in on-ground restoration efforts. So this is a drone map that we sketched together. This was mapped in partnership with the Ministry of Forestry. And was kind of integrated into their forest stock assessment work. So we partnered with them in the specific sites that we mentioned previously. And this is as a result of also some sort of timescale maps to understand the longer term drivers of degradation. We put together some imagery and also just to help us understand what's happening over time in these spaces. One of the key findings in Fiji and then in Ba and in Ra, specifically as case studies, is that cyclones are one of the major drivers of degradation and deforestation. It's challenging for a lot of reasons. I also think it underpins the necessity of unlocking community-based efforts to restore and recover these areas over time, because we know that natural disasters will continue. So we need tools and resources distributed in a technically, not overly jargon or technically manner that communities can use themselves. And that's part of the goal of this program and an additional project that will be moving forward from now. So with all of this information, we work to design a context-specific, science-based restoration plan together with our community partners. One of our main community partners is Varotu in Ra, and we've been working with them to do sort of on-ground restoration for the last couple of years. This is a high-level map of coming out of our restoration plan. I am going to ask if Sarah and Apisai are available to share a little more about the restoration process that they led together with Clint and our communities. So I've got 3 slides just to share a little bit about how we did this restoration work, the role of our community partners, and some of the things that we've seen so far. Are you guys able to unmute?
Thank you, Bridget. And thank you, SPREP, for this opportunity for us to share the blue carbon story from the mangroves of the Ra province. With me in the Conservation International Ra Field Office is our field officer, Nemani, and also Api Meleki, our blue carbon project officer, field officer, and myself is the blue carbon project coordinator. So we'll be splitting up the slides amongst ourselves. We'll speak best on what we are familiar with. So we are grateful we have Nemani here. So he'll be the one that will talk about one of the success stories that have come out of this project. So I'll just ask Api to talk more on this restoration process and methodology a bit.
Bulawinaka all in regards to this restoration process. We first started since we just had knowledge of the terrestrial environment, and then this was the first time we were moving to the mangroves, and we sort of trial and error. So we just found out that the deadwoods were the main stuff that were blocking the tides from getting the propagates for regeneration. So we started off. We sort of put a trial site where we removed deadwoods and using chainsaws. The Ministry of Forestry were engaged in this as well. They really helped us in the first trial. We conducted some training first, whereby the villagers were trained in using chainsaws and all the safety measures that we needed to take in consideration when we start clearing the deadwoods from the mangrove. We started off with the clearing, and then we sort of put off in situ nurseries. First, when we started on, we found when we tried we had 3 trial sites. One whereby we planted the mangrove seedlings that were potted. One of the sites had the mangrove seedlings which were the wildlings. We just uprooted from the mangroves and then we planted it directly. And another site we had where there was a mixture of both potted plants and those that were uprooted from the wildlings and planted directly. We just wanted to know which method worked best. Then when after the trial, after a few months, we did some survival assessments. And we just found out that the seedlings that were potted, they were healthy. So we started using the method of getting in more potted seedlings. Communities were engaged. Mostly the women were engaged in potting activity, and the youths were engaged in the clearing of deadwoods. This is just to make way for the restoration. During the last year, we managed to restore around 21 hectares of mangroves. We just used this method of first clearing, and then we planted potted seedlings from the in situ nurseries. The main stakeholders involved, there were the 5 communities along Naviti Lebu Bay. There were 5 villages: Nanukuloa, Barotu, Nasirlang, and Matoi Lebu, and Nabuni from the other side. The chiefs of the district, Nalawa and Saibo, they fully supported the restoration work as well as the RAP Provincial Council. They were engaged in all of the process during the restoration with the communities. The women and youth were mostly involved, as I mentioned before, in the potting activity, whereby soil were potted, and then we planted propagules. Firstly, we started off with the propagules that were the ones that were blooming with 2 to 3 leaves, but then we sort of tried the ones that we picked directly from the trees, as according to some previous experiences that there were some scientific reports that we read that we were not supposed to pick propagules directly from the trees and plant them, but we sort of asked the villagers what worked best, and according to their traditional knowledge, they said that we needed to pick the propagules. So we sort of tried it, and we saw that this worked best in as they were healthy. The propagules that were picked directly from trees, they were healthy when we planted them in nurseries, and we are just because that was according to some reports we read that we were not allowed to pick propagules. This in regards to the Bruguiere species. There were like 2 main species in Navitilu Bay, the Rhizophyra and Bruguiere. We're trying to restore the Bruguiere species because it's the main species in the district. We, according to some reports that were published, that the Bruguiere species we were not allowed to pick propagules. It didn't work in some places, but we tried it in Navitilu Bay. It really worked. And this was somehow, and we just found out they were healthy and they grew very well. And now we are using that method, just picking directly from the trees, planting into the in-situ nurseries, growing them up to 5 to 6 leaves, and then we transplant them into the restoration sites. So far for this new phase, we've planted around 26,000 seedlings as of last week. In the last phase, we planted more than 60,000, and the communities were mostly engaged in this planting. All men, women, and the youth. We try to include them in all the levels of the restoration work, and we just hope that they'll continue the work after this good work of restoring the natural communities. I think I'll pass it on to Nem for the livelihood initiative. She knows what she wants about it.
Yeah, just adding up to Api's story. I think one of the things that we work on was the spacing that we used on the planting site. Like he was explaining on the trial site, we used the 1.5 spacing, and after that we moved to the spacing of 1 by 1 meter, so that it can cover most of the gaps along the sites that we are doing the restoration. And what we found out that when we use that spacing of 1 by 1, we can see the trees, the plants are growing so well. Since we were using that 1.5, I think some of the small crabs, they were eating the stems of the seedlings that they were planting. So it creates gaps along the planting sites. So that's why we move to that spacing of 1.1, 1 meter spacing. And also some of the findings that we found out on the restoration work, I think the tides that come into the sites, some of the sites, they are not, the tides only covered during that big tides during the month. And that is another factor that we have found out that contributing to the survival of the seedlings that we are planting right now. And what we also found out during rainy season, we see that the seedlings are growing well. I think we just passed a seasonal, a dry season, so we found out some gaps along the site. So we'll, along our monitoring program, we are planning to undertake a bit up work to replace the dead ones, so we can maintain the survival rate along the 5 restoration sites that we are working on. Just on the success of some of the activities that we have done through this project, the knowledge that they have gained in the nursery work. I think 4 communities, they requested for their nursery into their village so that they can be part of that 30 million tree initiative with the Fiji government. So one of the success villages, the Baroto village, we managed to construct a nursery, and we registered them through a project at the Ministry of Finance. It's called the Job for Nature. So they won that tender. It was signed last week. So now, for now, they are collecting the seedlings from other communities that to feed in their order that Ministry of Finance will give them. I think according to the provincial office at the conservation unit, 44 groups along within the Ra province, they are registered to do the work for the planting through the Job for Nature work. So through that program, Baroto will be the main supplier in the province for the supply of seedlings. Within the 3 categories that Job for Nature are looking forward to, the mangrove restoration, the riparian restoration, and I think restoration of idle lands in the inlands. So they will also, for the riparian, they are using that vetiver grass for the riparian restoration together with integrate with the fruit trees. And for the coastal restoration, they will go for that mangrove rhizophora species. Yeah, I think the budget for that has been given to the community. The price of seedlings, the mangrove seedlings, the Ministry of Finance will give them at $2 a plant. And other species, they are given $3 each. According to the order, they might receive $1.2 million for the cost of seedlings that will be supplying to the 44 registered groups in Ra province, Inba, Nandonga, and towards the Dawasamu, Tailebu province. For the other 3 nurseries, I think one of the nursery have been registered to the tender for the Ministry of Forestry. We are waiting for the forestry's verification to the nursery. according to that nursery in Nanukulua that they have registered to that vendor. They also have we have stocked the seedlings that Ministry of Forestry needs to verify a total of 5,000 seedlings to be in the nursery to be qualified into that tender. So the other two nurseries, we are planning to run a nursery management training, and we are trying to get them registered next year for the next Ministry of Forestry tender, so that all of them can be part of that nursery work. And maybe we are planning to register them as a cooperative, so that they can work together and try to supply the seedlings to the rest of the program, restoration program in the province.
Thank you so much, Nem. Thank you, Appy and Sarah, for this really rich update and to share. I mean, I think this for us is a huge success. Community partner operating commercially and receiving a government tender worth $1.2 million to provide seedlings for this large scale effort. So exciting to see, and we're working to share this story a little more broadly, and we'll be continuing to provide, as Nem said, ongoing support to our community partners to ensure their strong success under the tender. Just going to move forward.
Sorry, Bridget. Sorry for interrupting. May I ask you please to, in the purpose of time and for our final speaker and time for discussion, just trying to wrap up in the next 2 minutes,
absolutely.
please? Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Nicholas. I'm just going to move forward a little bit. We've also done some work on community exchanges, and I think the team mentioned some of the restoration successes, 22 hectares, all these things. We've also seen some biodiversity benefits, but I won't go into much deeper discussion around that. I think at the big picture, I just have 2 more slides, Nicholas, and I'm done very quickly. We believe there's still an opportunity and a need to strengthen, policy integration for nature and MBS, to continue to build capacity. And you mentioned financing. So financing at scale for these issues is essential, as well as long-term financing pathways, such as through carbon trading, which we talked about and we are exploring. Engaging all members of society in the participation in the design and the delivery of these programs of work, and recognizing, the ownership and ensuring the ownership of the next generation through their participation. And of course, strengthening partnerships such as under the Kiwa Initiative. So my last slide, I'll just share we're very excited to be one of the most recent signatories under the Kiwa Initiative. Our program is called the Restore Initiative. We were going to be scaling up some of the lessons learned from this project to interventions in Samoa, Fiji, and Timor-Leste, really focus on restoration of mangroves as well as coral reefs in the coastal zone realm, integrated within management planning actions, very much focused on sustainable livelihoods as a core pillar of success within any intervention of this space, and really consolidating some lessons learned and sharing across our partner of folks in the Kiwa program and across the Pacific region. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share. Okay.
Pinaka Vakalevu, Bridget, and team from CI. Really great to hear this story, and I'm glad we'll go a little bit deeper when we will meet in RA end of November with some of our Kiwa projects, local and regional projects, just after the Kiwa Steering Committee meeting. So we'll be able to discuss in more details about this really success story, and yeah, be able to learn a lot of lessons also along with other Kiwa projects and partners. So I would like to invite Francois So you should be able to share your screen. Bridget, we've got a question in the chat box. You can take time to read it, and we'll have a common a collective discussions after Francois' presentation. So Francois, are you able to share your screen?
Hi, everyone. Can you see that screen?
Yeah. Just need
Awesome.
full screen, and that would be.
That's
Okay.
exciting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Over to
Thank you very
Francois.
much, Nicolas. It's all smooth and well. And I understand it would be great to make it in less than 15 minutes. So hi, everyone. It's great to see tens of people from all across the Pacific to join together under this webinar. And thanks for Kiwa Initiative and SPREP to allow this opportunity to share experience and learn together. So basically, we are looking at New Caledonia under the Kiwa Payback Plus funded project with support of the French Jeff as well. So this is a regional project. I won't go into every details, but if the slides are shared later, you can look at the details. Would you need that? This slide from, as you know, IPCC is important because in New Caledonia, we do have indigenous customary leaders that are in their, let's say, 70s and that are very influential and very committed to share how was New Caledonia when they were young. And this transgenerational cohesion and transmission of knowledge and know-how and practice is very important in many areas, including in coastal ecosystems. And many efforts are put in raising awareness and educate the younger generations, but actually the decision makers beyond these indigenous customary leaders are people like us, like our age, maybe our direct supervisor or our director. And those are the people that will effectively make the difference for tomorrow. So I will be presenting a couple of demonstration activities within the Greater Numia in Province Sud, here in New Caledonia. I believe there are some people from New Caledonia, from Province Sud, from some communities or public authorities of the Greater Numia. So I really want to acknowledge their presence to indeed see how the collaborative work is showcased here. There was a question from Hubert Giraud from WWF in New Caledonia that is also very relevant to our case, and I might bring some answers to that question. Thank you. So what we are doing is part of a memorandum of understanding between the Province Sud, the 4 different municipalities of the Greater Numia, and the University of New Caledonia. So we have about 2,000 hectares of urban mangroves under high pressure in this urban setting, which is a very important high-stake place for the whole of the country, for all the figures you can see down there. So I don't read them, you have them, you can read back when you receive the presentation later. But this is a high-stake place to demonstrate that nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based adaptation can help people to adapt to climate change with multiple benefits. So when we talk about nature-based solutions, it's good to look at nature and get inspired by nature. So if you look at that tree, which is Excoecaria agalosha, we call it in French the white mangrove tree. This tree has an amazing root system. It's probably, to my knowledge, at this point in time, the most effective root system of any vegetation to really stabilize that kind of land, which is a reclaimed land over the shoreline. You can see the 4 different sites where we are having interventions as part of Kiwa Payback Plus project, and the green dot patches are the mangroves, right? So you can see that this urban mangrove downtown Numia is an important one. And it's not only important because it's one of the few ones within Numia downtown, but it's also because it's an urban park. So every day we have thousands of people coming in for, having a walk, a bike ride, or getting their kids to refresh. And this is one of the very few places that is effectively multi-ethnic, multi-generational in the whole of New Caledonia. So this is a very relevant place for demonstration activities. Nicola, you were asking about what kind of resources do we use? Yes, we do use SPREP 2015 Rehabilitation Guide for coastal ecosystems. And yes, I would love, and I think many others would love to be a little more specific, because these drawings are fantastic. It's no matter. It's been very inspirational to me and all the individuals that are present today, from Noumea City Council, from Province Sud authorities and others. But it would require a little bit more specifics, please. You've mentioned some on mangrove restoration. They are awesome. And they are very resourceful indeed. So the place we are talking is a 40 plus hectares mangrove downtown Noumea that has been damaged in the late 50s for developing a communication system, which is no longer in place, in use at the moment. And you can see how the mangrove degraded over time between the 70s and the early 2000s, not only because of these reclaimed land through the mangrove, but also because there's been an intense urbanization process in that area with a lot of fresh, dirty water. Dirty water for mangroves may mean a lot of nutrients. So a shift in species composition. You may see mangroves declining or even dying in some areas. And then in the 2000s, there's been some water treatment plants set up just by the mangrove. We may even see it on the top left corner of the image on the right. And then you can see that the mangroves recover. But there are some places where the mangrove is still dying back, especially in the in the bottom right corner of the image. You see the mangrove is still dying back. And we have hypothesized that this was due to deadwood across the main water channels across the mangrove after 2017 two cyclones we have had here in New Caledonia, plus maybe other processes. But mainly this was supposed, this is the problem. So we have been consulting the local community. There are some illegal settlers that have been living there for over 30 years that use the mangrove, that live in the mangrove, on top of all the pedestrians and neighbors enjoying very much this place. And this is a very high pride for all the neighbors who have the facility to walk through the mangrove. You can see that bridge over a water channel that is obstructed by dead woods. And that was a lot of fun. And I must say that indigenous people, and especially women, have been very swiftly understanding the importance of cleaning up the water channels within the mangrove. It's like our blood veins in our body. If they got obstructed, we got a health problem. Same thing for the mangrove. And this is not me that is inventing these priority interventions in mangrove. It's really best practice worldwide documented. And I realize that CI in Fiji is already at work on that. The outcome of that is that the Noumea City Council has been proactive in upgrading its hydraulic system going across the walkways in the mangrove. As you can see on the top left corner, the water channels have been cleaned up and we have more fish in the area. These fish I've never seen before the interventions, and now they are very regular. There are other species that were not seen before that are now out there. Under climate change scenario and sea level rise, we believe it is also important that these water channels can be cleaned up so that the natural processes of propagular dispersion through currents can be effective and with these cleaner water channels. Thank you. Now we're moving to coastal protection, which is a lot more challenging. Cleaning up the water channels in the mangrove is a no-brainer type of work. A lot of fun, by the way. protecting the coastline under erosion is a much more challenging piece of work. We are here in an area that is very exposed to wave energy at high tide and during storms. This is a highly popular place. You can see on the top right, the cycling path, and there is a road. It's during the storm, so no one is out there. But you have thousands of people every day on this site, which is making this place a very interesting demonstration site. So anyway, we've done the diagnostic. This is a reclaimed land again. And actually, many of the coastal erosion, many of the places where we do have coastal erosion in New Caledonia are either reclaimed land and places where the shoreline vegetation has been degraded. So sea level rise is not the only factor that is causing coastal erosion. And when we want to protect the coastline and we have had degradation for whatever reasons, then there is a whole process in terms of behavior change, shared understanding, and long-term planning. So anyway, this is our situation. The little cliff you have seen on the picture is eroded because of the waves at high tide, and we've done topographic survey. So this is not a theoretical model. This is exactly what the place looks like, with the pedestrian walkway, the bike ride way, and the road. So this is the current situation. And then we are unsure about climate change trajectory, but mainstream hypothesis and model at the time says plus 80 centimeters. It might be that we might have a lot more sea level rise, but this is for now the main hypothesis we have. So that means that we will have significant further erosion if nothing is done. The coconut tree will fall over, the pedestrian walkway will go away, the bikes might no longer be able to bike out there, and even the road may be perhaps damaged by these higher waves because of higher intensity storms. So now what do we do? How do we plan for retreat? Or do we just engage gray protection, which will not be Kiwa Paperplux project investment, of course? What is the appetite for public authorities for ecosystem-based adaptation or green-gray infrastructure? This requires significant survey and planning and being clear on the potential impact of doing nothing or various scenario or options in this area. This is and meanwhile, you know, at the moment, New Caledonia is not an easy time to make plans for long-term on things that may not be priority. Meanwhile, what kind of EBA or nature-based solution makes sense under uncertain future? What can we do that may give more time to public authorities to make their decision? And we have to respect the timing of their decision-making. So this is what we are trying to do, is really do everything we can to facilitate the accretion of sediments in the berm and the higher beach. So there are various interventions. You can see the names here, and you can see what it looks like here. So basically, reducing the wave energy by various interventions to reduce the erosion on the cliff and facilitate the accretion of the sediment in the berm and the accumulation of seeds brought by the currents or that we may bring ourselves is something of interest. So you can see on bottom left and bottom center some seeds from respectively Excoecaria galosha and Avicennia marina. And that's very interesting because direct seeding costs nothing. If you do it at the wrong place, well, you've lost your energy. Yeah? But it costs nothing, basically very little. And we have very interesting success. And for the Avicennia, at this point in time, it looks like it costs 3 times cheaper. But as you can see, the survival rate over the first 24 hours has been very low. So we can seriously increase the way we do these transplantation of pre-germinated seeds. This is very interesting because we are working in a very high energy place. And it seems like we may have some very interesting solutions, and working with local communities, their civil society, organizations, and public authorities, all the way from government to province to municipal authorities, looks very promising. Now, you in the invitation, Nicolas, you were asking about key challenges and how to strengthen our respective capacities for supporting implementing restoration efforts. Well, I have here a few challenges. Maybe I won't go over them all the way, but this is my last slide. So I thank you, everyone. And if you have any question on the work we've done, or if there is any key challenge that you want to spot here for any question and answer, I'm very happy to leave that slide open for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, François. Merci beaucoup. Yeah, your last slide is also really useful for us as we wanted to engage in a collective discussion, so we can maybe leave it on the screen. So yeah, we've got now like 10-15 minutes to discuss. So please, if you had ask questions in the chat that you feel haven't found any responses so far, please feel free to raise your hand. And yeah, please, if you have any if you have any questions, either for CI or François or Richard, please step in and mute yourself. We can allow us 10 to 15 minutes to wrap up the webinar. But we would
so while we wait
to...
for,
yeah,
sorry, Nicolas, to interrupt you, to be very direct to Hubert's question. Would we be in a time of no urgency on coastal ecosystems benefit to people? Then my answer to your question is no. Of course, we don't need to clean up the water channels in the mangroves. The reality is that mangrove is fragile because of historical urbanization. The trees are not as strong as they used to be because they grew under a number of perturbations, including higher amount of fresh water and higher amounts of nutrients. So they are more fragile than, let's say, natural mangrove trees. And then we have lots of big threats, especially on coral reef ecosystems. So having a healthier mangrove that can clean up more effectively the dirty water coming from the not perfectly treated sewage from the urban area is something that we should do, I believe. Thank you. Any other question that I've missed, maybe?
Thank you, François. I don't see any other questions in the chat for you now. So could you please just stop sharing your screen for now, François? I just would like to... so just to show you a couple of questions we had for you at the end of this webinar. So yes, please, if you would like to share some of the challenges you're facing right now as part of your Kiwa project or other activities in terms of designing, implementing, or monitoring and learning from coastal restoration activities, coastal ecosystem restoration activities, please feel free to put that in the chat or raise your hands. And we just wanted to highlight the the sharing of resources, technical guidance that SPREP, SPC, and our other partners can provide or can assist with to support your project design or implementation at this point of time or over the next few months. Which kind of resources, which kind of platforms would you like to use? And again, to keep track of new released resources or specific resources that align with your challenges or needs. So that was one of the key aspects we wanted to raise at the end of this webinar with you. And again, we'll meet with some of you at the end of this month in Fiji, right after the Kiwa Steering Committee meeting, where we will discuss in more details some of these aspects and challenges when speaking about coastal ecosystem restoration. So would anyone like to step in and have a go in terms of the challenges or resources you might use or you might need, and that we can assist with as part of other webinars or workshops? Or what would you like to, or what would you feel relevant for your current or upcoming projects for coastal restoration? Some specific topics or areas you would like to work on together? No burning questions or suggestions?
Hi, Nicholas.
Yeah.
I think I just want to highlight, been having some really good side discussions from a few folks in the chat, so thank you all. And sorry to call you out, Semi, but a really great question from Semi and discussions around like the costing for restoration actions. I think that's an area that we would like to, do a little more work on, and maybe there's a group interested in this. I know that for the terrestrial realm, based on some of the experience in Nakavandra, CI has been able to come up with some kind of broad like equations for calculating cost of different species and monitoring and sort of over the long term, like a long-term investment that integrates monitoring time frame with our community partners. So, they're always site specific and sort of context specific, but even just guidelines to help people cost out what successful restoration could look like over the long term, and the cost maybe of different technical interventions, because every restoration plan needs to be site and community and ecologically specific, but perhaps that's a space where there's interest in deeper discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. Yeah, definitely. That's something we thought about because that's definitely something we are missing sometimes when it comes to assessing options comparing options. So that we had it was last year as part of the NBS working group, a really informative presentation from GGGI on some of the cost benefit analysis with specific case studies on coastal protection, and that would be really and yeah, we were thinking to engage a little bit more on that because we've got some of the tools that have been released recently on cost-benefit analysis for coastal resilience or coastal adaptation, as well as the Pacific EBA tool, which provides some of the figures. So yeah, definitely something to work on and provide more guidance on figures for practitioners and project designers. We'll have that in mind for future work. What could be an easy way to collect between now and the next learning event in a few weeks? Yeah, sure. So so speaking of that, so we've got a little questionnaire survey right now that Mathilde will put in the Zoom. So that's part of the way we can engage further between now and the next time. So next time, as I said, some of the, I mean, we invited the Kiwa projects and partners for those of them who participates in the Kiwa Steering Committee meeting and end of November in Fiji. So to join a technical workshop that we will be organizing together with CI. We will go in the Ra province to see firsthand what they've presented today and go a little bit further into that specific area and case study where we will learn a lot. But yeah, and then we'll have other events that can be webinars, that can be workshop. We were also thinking of developing a policy brief, probably not for practitioners, but more for decision makers, policymakers, by mid of next year on coastal restoration. That could help us to highlight some of the key challenges and solutions that we've got in the region to overcome some of these challenges, and of course upscale coastal restoration efforts, especially towards target 2 of the global biodiversity framework, as I alluded to in my presentation. So yeah, please feel free to take a few minutes to answer the questionnaire survey, and that will help us to engage a little bit more after this session today, and discuss with you all about what we can progress and where we'd like to move forward after this session today. So I'll stop here. I'll give you a little bit more time to fill in the survey. And Aurélie, please, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you very much, Nicolas. I just wanted to take the occasion of this webinar so I am Aurélie Amim Richard, I guess. Well, I recognize the name of a lot of you. I'm from AFD in coordination of the Kiwa Initiative with the Kiwa Secretariat. And I wanted to take the occasion of this webinar to thank SPREP for the initiative of this series of learning events on coastal ecosystem restoration through Kiwa Initiative. and thank everyone for the very interesting and inspiring presentations on this subject. These presentations reflects the diversity of projects and initiatives within Kiwa, but also outside of Kiwa, and it's important for us to inspire from other initiatives too. And I think of a lot of other projects within Kiwa Initiative, regional project, but also local projects. I can that are followed by IUCN. I can think of the WWF parent project in New Caledonia, but a lot of other as well. And those projects are at different stages. Some are beginning to be quite advanced in their implementation, and others are just beginning. And as donors, we are very eager to provide that kind of support that SPREP is leading through Kiwa as implementing partner, to have that kind of cross-cutting learning approach between Kiwa project, but also inspiring from other initiatives and from existing also experience and resources. And that was to mention this interest from the donors, and speaking in the name of the donors of the Kiwa Initiative for that kind of approach. And it's important, and thank you very much, Nicola, for insisting on that aspect in your introduction, to better understand how much all of you Kiwa project leaders are also interested in participating in that kind of exercises, and how we can jointly identify gaps and where there could be added value from the Kiwa Initiative to jointly learn together from. And it's important for us to consider that we would learn from concrete cases and experience from the Kiwa project. And it would be very interesting also for us donors to better understand and learn from your experiences, and that we can share also all this with other practitioners and with also institutionals, stakeholders, through this idea of a policy brief. So thank you very much to all of you for participating today to this first session, and thank you to SPREP. Thank you also to SPREP and CI for the second session we will have in person in Fiji. And that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Aurélie. Yeah, great points outlined in terms of the Kiwa donors, and we really acknowledge yeah, the space that the Kiwa Initiative offers to all projects and partners. This is really key for many of our partners and stakeholders implementing projects on the ground. So with that, I would like first to thank again a lot our speakers today. That was very informative sessions and presentations. There is a lot to cover, of course, when we talk about coastal ecosystem restoration. That's a huge topic, and we were absolutely not able to cover a lot in 2 hours, but thanks as well to you all for responding, and to the questionnaire survey. We will use your answers and suggestions to think a little bit more from one session to another, how we can move forward. And we are really eager, be it SPREP, SPC, or IUCN, to play this also facilitating or catalyzing role in terms of resource sharing, peer-to-peer learning towards coastal restoration efforts in the region. Especially SPREP has been labeled scientific and technical support for Oceania as part of the global biodiversity framework. So target 2 in terms of ecosystem restoration is part of that. So yeah, there will be also internal discussions to know how we can make the most of our discussions and also use our other divisions and programs to assist us with that and to assist you further in the coming months. So thanks again to all our speakers today, to the Kiwa Secretariat for joining, and to all of you. We will stop here. We passed the expected end time of this webinar, and we'll be really happy to provide feedback, all the resources shared today during this webinar. And we look forward to working with you over the next few months on this topic on coastal ecosystem restoration for climate adaptation in the Pacific. Thank you very much, and have a great day wherever you are. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.